This is Lis Smith, for people that don't know her. We've been longtime friends. She was an advisor to a lot of really important winning campaigns. There was, Tim Ryan. Let's go. I'm trying to think. There was Pete.
I would never advise Tim Ryan.
I'm going to go through all your... Oh, sorry. You have Pete. Who else did you have?
Barack Obama.
Did he win?
Yes. Pete Buttigieg. I mean, I've worked on now close to 30 campaigns, but Pete.
What about the L's, though? Let's talk about the L's.
The L's. Oh, there are a lot of those.
Yeah.
But I did Claire McCaskill, U.S. Senator from Missouri. I did her first campaign. In terms of the L's, there are a lot. Jon Corzine in New Jersey, Ted Strickland in Ohio.
That's who I was going for when I said Tim Ryan. Ted Strickland.
Yeah.
That was an L.
Yeah.
It was a crushing defeat, actually.
He lost by 2 points. It was in 2010. It was a wave year. But and then this past cycle I had a lot. I worked for Adam Schiff, your current senator here. Yeah, he's one of my clients. Tom Suozzi, who won the big special election. I did that and advised over a dozen members of Congress.
All right. So you had a book that you wrote.
The new mayor of San Francisco is Daniel Lurie.
New mayor.
So a lot of California stuff right now.
San Francisco could use a new mayor. Hopefully, fingers crossed for Mayor Lurie. So you wrote the book a couple years ago.
Yeah.
A lot has changed. But we're at a book festival, so I figure we'll do a little bit of book stuff, and then we'll do, I assume they're here for your politics hot takes, so we'll get to that in a minute. But let's just do a little bit of the Liz story. Why? Writing a memoir at age 38, a little hubristic. What was the mindset there?
Wow. Rolling in hot, Tim. So I never thought I would write a book, certainly not at 38, and but it was really, the timing really worked out. I got approached after Pete's campaign. I was staffer zero for Pete Buttigieg. I came up with his communications, media strategy. I started working with him in December of 2016 when he was just the mayor of South Bend. He called me up. He wanted to run for DNC chair, and just the second I sat down with him, I just had that moment where you're like, oh my God. And, it got chills. And I was like, immediately was like, why are you running for DNC chair? You should be running for president. And I just, so I was staffer zero on his presidential campaign. And it was, I think in terms of modern politics, really the sort of one of the ultimate Cinderella stories. And so after the campaign ended,
I will say, when you called me around that time being staffer zero, and you're like, hey, I found my horse for 2020. I was like, oh, fun. Great. Who is it? You go, Pete Buttigieg, mayor of South Bend. And I was like, looking at my husband, I was like, I think Liz is having an emotional breakdown right now. I don't know what is happening. I think that the Trump years have done something to her brain. This is very concerning. I was worried about you.
Yeah, people asked me if I'd lost a bet or something. Yeah. And so I did that. And so because of that and how close I was with him and our media strategy and communication strategy was so integral to his rise. I did, and I guess I'm probably not your average political consultant, right? There was some interest. There were some stories written about me during the campaign, and afterwards I got approached about writing a book, and I was like, are you out of your damn mind? But then the pandemic happened. We're all locked down. I was like, maybe this is a sign, and it really was a good time. And the more I thought about it, I'd read a lot of political books, a lot of political memoirs, and I had never seen one written by someone like me. And nothing against men, nothing against white men. I know I'm a Democrat, but I don't have problems with white men. But I had never seen a book written by someone like me. Where a woman, a woman talking about rising to the top of this industry that is so male-dominated, this boys' club, and sort of how I balance, and I didn't make it just about politics. I didn't want to write a political science book. And when I talked to, my agent, I was like, I want it to be more like the New York Post than the New York Times. I want it to be a little gossipy, and I have an interesting personal life, so I wove in.
You do.
I tried to weave in sort of how you balance, having a personal life with the stresses of politics, and how you navigate being a woman, a younger woman, in this very male-dominated world. And I tried to be honest about the good, the bad, and the ugly of it. And basically give a roadmap for someone like me when I was 18 and looking, interested in politics, like what it would be like and all the personal sacrifices and all the things that you have to go through to be in this business.
It's a 10:30 a.m. panel, so if it
Yeah.
was a 10:30 p.m. one, I would be focused on the personal life parts
Yeah.
of the book. But we haven't had any cocktails yet, so we'll just do the politics part, and people can read it if they want the dish.
Well, not Senator Danforth though.
Please don't
Yeah.
read it. Or just
Yeah.
tell them which chapters.
Skip
not
over
to
that
read.
part, yeah.
Just tell them which pages to rip out about your personal life. There's some awes there. I don't know. Maybe we need to have a bonus section, like a Rancho Mirage Plus, Rancho Mirage After Dark, where we hear about all that. All right. So what I wanted to get at we were kind of writing our books around the same time.
Yeah.
So it was a self. It was a
I
self.
know what I was gonna say. You
Yeah,
burning me for doing a memoir.
I was hitting myself, just subtly. But my book was talking about a lot of the ways in which the politics had let me down. I let myself down, and how I had become jaded and cynical in ways that I don't think was very healthy. And I've had young people come up to me. I literally had a kid at USC stop me in the bathroom, and he goes, "Are you Tim Miller?" And I was like, "Usually I don't talk to people in the bathroom, but okay." He was very interested. I said, "Yes." He goes, "I was gonna go into political science. I read your book, and I decided I'm gonna do something else." And I was like, "Okay, all right. Well, that's good, I guess. At least you're like at least it made you think. I don't know if that was really what I wanted." But your book is kind of the opposite of that, right?
Yeah.
Like your book is really about the good. I mean, obviously you're candid about the jaded and cynical stuff that I talk about, but you also focus on the aspirational side. So I assume you've talked to younger people who've read the book, who've had that opposite perspective that I have, that I give people. So I'm just curious, can you give people a little sunshine, I guess?
Yeah,
about the political
it
life?
actually really has been the opposite of that, and I think that's the part that surprises me the most. I remember I was at a DNC meeting. God, I remember I was like, I had the worst morning sickness. I was about 10 weeks pregnant. It was like February of 2023, and I was going to the bathroom, and I swear to God, I got stopped by so many, especially young women, who wanted to stop me, get a selfie, and told me how they'd read my book and decided to get into politics because of it, and wanted to took my career advice, wanted my, we exchanged emails, all of that, and so. Again, I didn't try to go out and write a book that was like everything is sunny, and I talk about things I did that I regret. I talked about great people I work for, but I talked about, not great people I work for, and people who I think brought out the worst in me. But ultimately, the title of my book is Any Given Tuesday, and it's based off of the saying Any Given Sunday in football, right? And which is that on any given Sunday, really anything can happen on the football field. Like the worst team in the league can walk on and beat the best team in the league. And I think and it really involves an element of faith, right? Of faith to keep showing up to the games, to keep watching the games, and I think that is really a part of politics. It does involve an element of faith, and which is that you can have a bad Tuesday. You can have, I had a bunch of bad Tuesdays in a row, right? And
you have a bad decade of Tuesdays.
Right, but then, what's weird is 2024 ended up being probably the best electoral cycle of my career, right? But for a lot of people, it was really bad. Yeah. But what it really takes in politics is an element of faith, is an element of belief that you're in this for the right reasons, that yes, you might have a bad Tuesday, you might work for someone who made you question why you're doing any of this, but around the corner, there is someone new and fresh who is in this for the right reason, who can inspire you, who can make your city, your state, your country better. And so that's why, whereas you sort of tapped out, right? That's why I continue to be involved because, and we were talking about this, right? Last year, for instance, I met Joe Neguse, and he's exactly the type
congressman
of...
from
congressman from Colorado. And every day, I meet these people and I understand why I'm still in it. And I think it's important that as bad, as chaotic, as sometimes dark as American politics can be, that if people like us don't stay engaged, if we don't continue to look out for the new, fresh faces, the people who are in this for the right reason, it is only going to get worse. It is only going to get worse. And so sometimes I wonder why I still do this, but it's because I do have faith that there is light around light at the end of the tunnel. There are always new faces and people who can still inspire people like me.
You mentioned the baby
Yeah.
Zane. and made me think, because you wrote the book before, like when you didn't have a kid, right? And so I do wonder kind of that, how you're sort of writing about this, being a woman in a very kind of bro-y environment, and like all these questions about like having to balance like work life and all that. I'm wondering if there's anything that's happened in the last, what year now?
18 months.
18 months, the last like year and a half, 2 years, that has given you a different perspective on what you would have written in the book, or made you think differently at all about kind of being, a woman and a mother in this business?
I mean, I think when you have a kid, God, I was about to say something, and I was like, am I going to sound like J.D. Vance when I say that? But,
Every once in a while,
like,
broken clocks.
But it does, there is something where I do feel like I have a little more skin in the game sometimes now that I have a son, right? A little more skin in the game in the future, right? And when I think about things, it's not just about this person winning this election or, how it's going to affect me. It's like, okay, wow, like I need to think decades ahead and things that are going to affect me. And that's why, when we talk about Trump's nominees and things like that, one of the reasons why RFK Jr. and that nomination really bothers me is, when I read about what RFK Jr. I don't know how many of you are familiar about this, but RFK Jr. really helped stoke this measles outbreak in American Samoa. 80-something people died, most of them children. And reading about those things now, as a mom, it affects me very differently from how it would have affected me pre-having a child. And I think about, okay, now this is going to be the guy who's in charge of our healthcare system. He's obviously, he's not there to take on big ag. He's not there to clean up our food supply. He's really there, I think, to sow doubt about vaccines and the health implications of that, and for children across the country, and for my child, if he's at a school where there's measles outbreak. I do think about things a little bit more on that personal level, and but I think when you have a child, and you tell me if you're a parent now, is you just can relate to other people better. When you can being a parent and the stress of being a parent, no matter who you are, where you live, what your income level is, how many kids you have, anything like that is it is a very universal experience, and the stress of being a parent, the enormous love you have, but the everyday stress is just something that everyone can relate to, and just the fear of your child walking around in this really crazy, uncertain world is just something I think it's a heaviness that consumes me a lot of the time.
That's true. It's also softened me, though.
It definitely has softened me.
It's softened me, and so I do, because I could have seen you saying the opposite, right? Which having the kid makes me think about other things that I'm valuing, and do I really want to be in the war room with these assholes?
Right.
Do I really want to focus on this as much? I could have seen you say the opposite.
But it also, the things I used to get stressed out about at work just really don't stress me out anymore. You realize the things that matter and don't matter. I thought I knew stress before I had a child, and oh boy, I didn't. But you tend to be more patient with people, and you tend to value your time a lot more. I'm not going to be on a call during his bath time or story time or bedtime.
Right.
And I think having that balance in life is really important.
We're going to do politics. One more. Do you have any other war stories? Do you have a favorite war story for the book you want to share?
Let's just
Come on, you got to have one. Give us a little something. Give us a little war story.
Let's go through some Q&A. Maybe it'll come out.
Maybe it'll come out.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. You mentioned the Pete thing at the top, and the thing that you did that was at some level kind of a simple insight, but that ended up being extremely profound insight that was very helpful for Pete, and I think looks even more prescient as the years have gone on, was this idea that Pete should go everywhere, right? Pete needs to do everything. If you're running for president in this modern media environment, you can't be picky and choosy about what kind of interviews. It's very different than a campaign in 1999. And so I'm wondering, well, A, if you want to give any examples for that and why you think that worked, but B, I'm wondering if there's a mayor out there that is thinking about running in 2028, and it's I don't think that these Democrats know what they're doing, and I want to be the next Mayor Pete. Is there would the tactical advice be the same you gave Pete, or is there something that has changed even more in that 8-year period?
Yeah. So obviously, when Pete, announced for president, no one knew who he was. No one could pronounce his name. He had no name ID, no national fundraising base, and he was a mayor of a town of 100,000 people, and we had a big credibility threshold to meet. And
he also was wearing horrible pants.
Oh yeah.
At that time.
We did. We worked on it. I mean, he had a real glow up in that campaign.
You got to look at the original Pete Pants pictures.
Yeah,
I think, like,
that was pre-me. That was pre-me.
Yeah,
that was pre-me. Yeah.
But
he did have a.
He was not ready for prime time in the pants department.
We got there. Okay. We got there. And so we understood that there was a big credibility threshold that we had to meet, and part of it is you got to go out and show people that you have what it takes, right? And that you're a serious person. This isn't just like some novelty, delusional campaign. And so part of that was like trying to, I knew he was the real deal. I knew he was really serious, like truly, truly a brilliant person. And he had thought a lot. He knew who he was, he knew what he believed, and he had like very strong, nuanced views on everything, the world, domestic politics, all of that. So my pitch to reporters was just sit down with him. Just give me 10, 15 minutes, whatever. And then they would see, he's serious. And so I knew that the more people heard from him, the more they'd like him, because he was a really, truly unique guy. And you've interviewed him. He's a great interview, and on top of being really smart and all that stuff, he's like funny. He's self-deprecating. He can speak about culture. He doesn't just stick to like talking points. And so we had to go everywhere strategy, because like it's not like people were coming to us and like just throwing money at him. And so we had to go out and really communicate anywhere that would take him. But it was also, part of it too was understanding the new media environment, right? Which is that people don't just get their news anymore from the daily newspaper, from the evening news. The way people consume news now is very different. It's very fractured. People have their own little silos. And so we made sure that, yes, in addition to talking to the big sort of, the traditional stops, the New York Times, the Sunday shows, the cable news outlets, that we would put them on like entertainment podcasts, we'd put them on sports podcasts, we'd put them on, we put them on a podcast, West Wing, that dissected episodes of The West Wing, And there are devoted audiences for all of these things. And we just sort of made it so that you really couldn't go anywhere with at some point hearing from Pete Buttigieg or about Pete Buttigieg. And it really did sort of lay the conditions that when he had a big moment in a CNN town hall in March of 2019, that we'd laid the groundwork so that he could take off, because certainly enough elites.
Which moment was that? Remind me.
When he talked about Mike Pence being the cheerleader for the porn star presidency.
Oh, right, yeah.
And that was really when everything changed.
Yeah.
And that's when he went from being like unknown, and it was just crazy. Like he completely warped political time. Usually you think about these things and presidential campaigns, all the steps you have to go through. He went from being completely unknown to like 2 weeks later, a poll came out in Iowa showing him in third place. Like he just vaulted. It was crazy, behind Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders. Yeah. But why it worked was not just because you went everywhere, right? So like technically you could put Joe Biden or Kamala Harris on all these shows.
Well,
but you can't.
Joe would have to be capable of doing every show.
But even if you could go on all these shows, but if you go on all these shows and say something boring, it's not going to work. And that's why I think some of the conversation that we have around 2024 and like, should Kamala Harris have gone on Joe Rogan? Would that have made the difference? I don't know that she should have, because like you should only go on Joe Rogan if you can like deliver a Joe Rogan interview. Like, and during the pandemic, like I listened to Joe Rogan every week. I got the alert when his new show came out, and mostly I listened to it for entertainers. Like his interview with Mike Tyson, incredible. I learned about all these drugs that I never knew existed. Fascinating, like stuff from frogs and things like that. Anyway, I'm
looking for new ideas for 2025 to deal with the reality. So I don't know.
Yeah,
maybe the
Mike
frog
Tyson
drugs.
is a fantastic interview.
Next thing you know, I'm gonna be licking
talk
frogs.
about Alexander the Great and Genghis Khan. It's really a great interview. But when she went on Call Her Daddy, she just went on and like talked about abortion policy, talking points, and the first time her parents bought a house, and like that's not delivering what people who are tuning into that podcast want to hear. And if you look at it, ultimately the views for it, it was like under 1 million, whereas Trump's interview on Rogan got tens of millions of views. And so it's not just about the tactics.
Right.
People
so
are
if you would have ended up with somebody not Pete, like you're saying, like the strategy might not have worked. Like
Yeah.
there are other politicians you like or good people, it'd be good presidents or governors.
Yeah,
it
depends on the person, right?
Yeah.
And like one of the things that Pete's known for is going on Fox News, right? And he can turn every bad faith argument on its head, and all of his things go. But like, if you're not quick on your feet, if you're not good with that sort of interview style, like it's not going to be good for you, right? And when Kamala Harris did Fox News, Brett Baier, I thought she was good, and I mean, she was absolutely fantastic. She was lights out impressive in the debate. I do debate prep, for a living, and like that was a really, really impressive debate performance. But not everyone can has all this sort of skills there and is good in interviews and things like that. So not everyone should have a go everywhere strategy. And look, with Joe Biden,
go nowhere worked for him.
Worked for him, yeah. So sometimes
for one election. Yeah. 1 for 2 and go nowhere. I do think about that. That is my thought about 2028 is, on the one hand, maybe the Democrats can win with somebody who's just inoffensive because people will be so sick of this by then, right? So, it's hard for us to project, what will the world look like in 2027? Who knows? On the other hand, if that's not the case, if the Democrats need to come up with someone that actually excites people, to me, I just think about your Pete strategy, and it's it has to be somebody that's as good as Pete or better, actually, to actually be able to pull it off, because you have to be able to be natural in these sorts of conversations.
And so my biggest thing about politics, and the thing I say to politicians is just be normal. And it's
hard for some people.
It is so hard for people. But when I do media prep with people, with politicians, sometimes I say to them, like what you just said to me, no one talks like that. And if you go and you say that, people are going to be like, that person is a robot. Political consultants wrote that talking points for him. Think about it this way. Let's say you're at a bar with your friend and you're trying to explain something to them. How would you talk to them about this issue? What are the words you would use? And what would your body language be? Go do that in an interview setting, and people are going to relate to you more. People are going to more understand what you're saying, and also people who might not even agree with you are going to relate to you more, because I think there is an artifice in politics that has really turned people off. And I think that we need to sort of, part of the go everywhere strategy with Pete is you sort of rip away the artifice and get to see more people who they are. And I think, we need politicians who can hang a little bit more,
Part of this is, I think, and this might be your job for the next 3 years, I just think that the Dems need a mass deprogramming.
Yeah.
Because part of it is not really their fault, right? There was a period of time in politics where what you were supposed to do is stay on message, right? Mm-hmm. That's why that phrase exists, right?
Yeah.
I did plenty of media trainings in the early 2000s where it's don't answer the question, just give your talking points.
Wait, so can I tell you something?
Yeah, please.
I did a media training with this member of Congress who now is a regular on Fox News.
Yeah.
We actually did a good job there. But he told me, he asked me in the media prep session, wait, so I'm supposed to answer with a yes or no? And I was like, yes. And he was like, wait, but political consultants always told me not to do that. And I'm like, what? I was like, if you're having a conversation with someone, when you just give a yes or no, if you don't give a yes or no, you sound really evasive, and the viewer and the interviewer, they're both going to think that you're not telling the truth or that you're hiding something. And we have so much deprogramming to do. Who are these people that are giving this advice? Senator Danforth, did people give you that advice?
Well, it was fine advice back in the day when all you had you're on the local news and they're only showing 20 seconds. So you don't look quite as bad when you're doing the evasiveness. But if you're on a 30-minute podcast, it becomes unbearable to listen to.
Yeah.
Actually, it's hard for me as an interviewer. I deal with. There are Democrats I like. Look, the type of people that are in the office right now for Democrats are people that are so impressive, right? Democrats mostly recruit people that are top of their class and went in the military or did well in business, right? They're recruiting the types of people you'd want in public service. But a lot of those people have, in order to achieve in life, have learned how to not offend anybody. right? Like I go up the ladder by, by actually getting results and staying on message and, doing things the right way. And I just, like, that I don't think is right for our politics anymore.
And that's part of, you've interviewed some of the people that I work with, like Marie Gluesenkamp-Perez, right?
She's great.
Fantastic. Member of the House from Southwest Washington, auto shop owner. She does not come from a traditional political background. And I think we need more people like that, frankly, who don't have this sort of sterling pedigrees that you associate. Like, there's nothing wrong with lawyers. We need lawyers, and lawyers should absolutely run for office. But, like, we also need some, people who work with their hands in Congress, people from different backgrounds. And I think it brings a different perspective, but it also, life view. And when they go into interviews, say different things, they don't have that sort of, I think that sheen, that polish that you're talking about. Yeah.
It's only the talking points, the phoniness. I was watching, Zelensky did an interview with, who's that guy? Lex Friedman. He does like a lot of big interviews around, but it's mostly more right folks. And like kind of the contrarian right, conspiracy type. And so, it was most of his interviews are with anti-Ukraine folks, like and then people that are advancing conspiracies about how they're Nazis and, whatever, they're biolabs. And so Zelensky's like, I'll go on and did it. And he did the interview, and I was just going through the YouTube comments, and a lot of people were like, huh, like this guy's making a lot of sense, actually.
Yeah.
Like people were surprised. And I think that like the Democrats aren't doing that. Because Zelensky does talk, and he's talking in Ukrainian, but like it's still
like a normal person.
Yeah, but like it's plain. Like the language is plain.
Yeah.
Like when he speaks English, he's doing it. It's kind of broken, but that sort of helps him.
He doesn't talk about building the economy from the middle
out and the bottom up, right? Like he just uses because he has limited English words, and so he just speaks in plain English, and it kind of worked. And it worked.
Yeah.
And like to me, that was like a big lesson. The Dems, like if you go and talk to Joe Rogan for 2 hours, like sure, there might be a clip where you say something that people use, where you look dumb or you look extreme or whatever. But the people that listen to the whole 2 hours will get a more three-dimensional view of you, and that gives you protection.
Because it's not just about politics when you go on there. Like you could spend 30 minutes. Well, if we went, 30 minutes talking about Joe Burrow.
Easy.
Yeah, we could have spent that entire hour here.
Yeah, we could
still.
We got 17 minutes left. We could do all Joe Burrow if you want. The other thing about this that I know we agree on, so we can have a heated agreement on this, but I wonder how you do this deprogramming. Because the deprogramming is also kind of getting off talking points, be more natural. But it's also stopping to use a lot of these buzzwords that have really become in vogue on the left. And I got to tell you, I was a little bit disheartened watching the DNC chairs debate. The people all seem like good people. Your former boss was doing it, Martin O'Malley. Wickler seems good. The new guy, Ken Martin, I don't know, seems fine. But like, they hadn't been deprogrammed yet on the stage. There was, we got to have our AANHPI affinity group engagement. And I'm like, what in the fuck is that?
Yeah.
I had to Google it. I had to Google it. Do you know what AANHPI is?
Wait. Asian American Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander.
Okay.
I only know that. I think I had to Google it too.
Right, but who talks like this?
Right.
And also, like, is it really necessary? Like, should the DNC really be prioritizing outreach to Native Hawaiians? Nothing against Native Hawaiians. It's fine. But, like, we could have them or not. Like, if they're good Native Hawaiians, great. I mean, I don't know. Anyway, it feels like that is a barrier for the Democrats to like speak to reaching people.
Yeah, well, I do think we should prioritize reaching out to everyone. But like, it's clearly not working. Okay, because we can talk about AA and HPI, but the reality is, one of the groups that we lost ground with in this election was Asian American voters, right? Yeah. We lost ground with Black voters. We lost largely because of Black men. We lost ground with Latino voters, and so clearly our idea of identity politics is not working with the identities that we're trying to reach out to, and so I don't think it works. I think it comes across as cynical. It comes across as, honestly, I also think it's sort of offensive, right? That when we're going to talk to a Latino audience, we just think, okay, let's just talk about immigration. Most Latino voters are people who have been here for generations. Their families have been here for generations. Spanish isn't the first language they speak. Or it's like when we go to Black audiences and like lead with criminal justice. I think that sort of politics is really outdated, and I think it's offensive. And
it did kind of work for Trump, though. He's like, I got a mugshot like you.
Oh my God. But also offensive.
And you also like gold shoes, right?
Like also offensive. So no, but I think DNC aside, from Democrats and conversations I've had with them, is I think a lot of people get that just doesn't work. And let me give you a behind the scenes sort of look at this. So I worked for Adam Schiff in that Senate primary, and he was running against Katie Porter, a woman, and he was running against Barbara Lee, black woman, and then when Senator Feinstein passed away, LaFonza Butler, a black gay woman, was appointed to the seat. And I remember some journalists coming to me and being like, Adam Schiff, he's a white guy. How is he going to beat a black woman or a black gay woman? That's just not where the Democratic Party is today. And I was like, no, you have no idea where the Democratic Party is today. That's people don't just vote based on identity. And if you look at the end results, Adam Schiff won women voters, he won black voters. And so just reducing people to identity and thinking you're only going to vote for someone because they're a woman or because they're black, or if you're black, you're only going to vote for the black candidate. If you're a woman, you're only going to vote for the woman candidate. Is I think it's offensive. I think it's outdated, and I just don't think it's true. And I mean, clearly, Adam Schiff showed that in the California primary. Thank God we need him.
Yeah, he's great. And there's also sometimes a backfire in all this. Also in that DNC debate. I'm sorry to pick on these people. It's just an example. Jonathan Capehart asked them, did Kamala lose because she's a black woman, because of racism and misogyny? They all raised their hand, and Ken Martin's jumping and raising his hand, yes, it was racism and misogyny. And there was probably some racism and misogyny, of course, right? There's a lot of things happening in the country. A lot of people have different motivations. But to me, I'm thinking if I'm Pete or Gretchen Whitmer or a black woman that is thinking about running for president next time, this actually is backfiring.
Yeah.
If you're out there saying that the country's too racist to elect Kamala, then you're basically saying that the Democrats should only nominate a white guy next time.
But not only them, it's with voters too. In the 2020 primary, the number one issue, we spent all this time going through the minutia of policy and all of that, the number one issue for Democratic primary voters in 2020 was electability. That's why, in the end, I think one of the reasons why we ended up with Joe Biden as the nominee. And voters, the more they hear that, racism, misogyny, all that, the less likely they are to ever want to nominate a woman, a black person, or anyone who isn't, straight white male. So I don't think it's, obviously these things are always going to be a part of the electoral stew and something that we need to consider. But, let's be real, there are a lot of other reasons why Democrats didn't win the White House this year.
I want to do Trump stuff, but I mean, you did pick the South Bend mayor and almost became the Democratic nominee last time. So, do you got any sleepers for us? Any people out there you really like?
I mean, I'm not going to give that out for free. No, but look, the reality is, if we've been having this conversation 8 years ago, I wouldn't have said Pete Buttigieg on stage, even if I had been thinking it, but we got to be more creative. We got to look beyond the names that are just in the news now. We got to look deeper. We got to look, beyond who's on this Sunday show, and find some fresh voices. And I said this on the panel yesterday, right? We are in a moment of utter chaos, and people are like, "Who is our leader? Who is the face of the party? Who's going to be our nominee in 2028?" And I think one silver lining to the chaos here is that we could see some new leaders emerge. Who has what it takes? Who has a new, interesting voice that can really break through, effectively take on Trump, effectively take on the Republicans, but more importantly, effectively articulate, a positive, affirmative vision for the Democratic Party? Because I think that's what's been missing. That was certainly missing in 2024. Is we very much said everything that needed to be said about Trump. By the end, he was Hitler, sexual assaulter, convicted of 34 felonies. All of that was out there, but people didn't have a reason to vote for Democrats, and we need to give people a reason to vote for Democrats.
I think that's a lot harder challenge. So I want to go to the first challenge, because this might be the one area we kind of disagree. Because I do think that there's a vacuum and there's a moment that somebody that is calling for leadership now among the Democrats. And I think back to, when would it have been? 2015, when Trump first emerged, right? And this was something where I was out of touch with Republican voters, because, Trump starts emerging, he's going in the pools, and reporters call, people, or I'll get in a fight with somebody on Twitter and be like, what? Trump was pro-choice, Trump stiffed people, Trump, you know, like all his companies went bankrupt. Like he's a clown. Whatever. We can do the whole list. And the response that became a cliche from people was, "But he fights." I don't actually care about any of that, but he fights for me. He fights. And like, I kind of rolled my eyes at that, like, and kind of made fun of it at the time. And it was because I wasn't radicalized against Barack Obama like a lot of the Republican primary voters were, apparently. And they wanted somebody to really fight the left that they really hated. Like I disagreed with Barack Obama on various policies, but I didn't hate him. But there was just this feeling out there of like, no, we need a fighter. We need someone to take them on. And to me, I think that is what Democratic voters are just, like, I think that there's a similarity to that right now. I think that they're yearning for somebody that will actually fight, that will actually be a leader and take him on right now and fight him. And I think that's a huge opportunity that I don't really see anybody grabbing the horns on.
Well, and there's time, but fighting is, we have plenty of people who are anti-Trump who go out and fight Trump.
Do we?
Yeah,
Who?
we do.
Who's doing a great job fighting Trump right now?
Okay, one person who's been out there a lot recently, Governor J.B. Pritzker, for instance, in Illinois, has been interesting. But you make that face. He's been president for like how long? 2 weeks now, something like that. And give it some time; these things will shake out. But the problem with Democrats, and I'm going to keep going back to this, is not that we aren't being mean enough to Donald Trump. We are, but we need to articulate a reason for people to vote for us too. And like the fighter thing, it's like that reminds me of like Michael Avenatti, 7 years ago, and everyone was like saying he fights. Now he's sitting in federal prison.
Yeah. Well, Michael Avenatti's not exactly the right vehicle for this, but. I don't know,
But we need someone who can fight, but also give people a reason to vote for us and give people some hope, Like,
sure.
I think people need to, people
Well,
feel
you need
really,
both.
Yeah.
You do need both. I agree with that. Trump also gave people a rationale.
Just saying Trump is bad is not enough to, lead
but
Democrats out
I
of
guess what I'm saying is it's a start. We could start there and then build to, giving people a reason to vote for them. I mean, Trump's whole success was based on just tearing Democrats down. Barack Obama's an African. Democrats are communists. Democrats are awful.
That works
Gavin
for Trump.
Newsom.
But I mean, he also, he did have an affirmative message too.
Yes, that's right. And so
I could tell you what his message was. I would have a harder time telling you what Kamala Harris's message was.
So this is where I was going next. Because I agree with that. I guess we disagree about whether there's enough fighty fighters happening. I could use a little more fighting. You're a maybe on it. We agree on the second part.
Some of this stuff is going to have to work itself out. Okay. Yeah.
On the second part, though, I had Carville on the podcast 3 weeks before the election, and to me, this is just this Q&A was the canary in the coal mine for why this was a loss, because I just watched his documentary, which is awesome, by the way. If you haven't watched it, you should. The documentary about him, and it was going back to the war room, and he had on the board, it's the economy, stupid, change versus more of the same, don't forget healthcare. And I said to Carville, I was like, what's Kamala Harris's, what's on the chalkboard for her? And he was like, James Carville, and he starts and he changes the subject, starts talking, goes off in a shtick, he did some good hee-haw colloquialisms, but the answer was we didn't know.
Yeah.
The answer was we didn't know, right?
Yeah.
And we can make fun of the red hats, but there's something to be said for having a message that can fit on a hat.
Yeah.
And I do think that's something that Democrats in 2028 are searching for.
Yeah, and I mean, it's sort of unfair to Kamala Harris because she was thrown in so late.
Of course.
And usually you have years to do this. You go through
a
long
primary. If I want to be unfair to somebody, I will be unfair to Joe Biden. Kamala Harris did great.
Yeah.
But so do you have thoughts?
On
do you want to spitball?
On what the logo, the MAGA should be?
A hat message?
And well, part of it too, right, is the world, we don't know what Trump's going to throw at us. We don't know what the world is going to throw at us. Global pandemic, and with RFK in charge of our nation's health system, God help us all. So, but yeah, I do think that we got to get clear on it, and we need bigger ideas. We need a clearer messenger. We need better messengers. All of those things are going to be a part of this. Do I have that magic message for you right now? No, I've got some ideas I've been noodling over, but probably not ready for prime time.
Not ready for prime time?
Not ready for prime time, but I do think that is a big thing. And we, with Obama, right, when he ran in 2008, it started as, really about the Iraq War.
Yeah.
But then you had the economic collapse, right?
Right.
And then, so even in that campaign, everything had to shift, and that's part of the reason why McCain's campaign really just, imploded because he had no economic chops. So you and I could come up with a lovely, inspirational slogan, all that right now, but we don't know what the world is going to look like in 6 months, a year, 2 years, 4 years.
I know you get paid the big bucks for this, but but it's not as complicated as it seems. And really, like if you go back to look at all of the elections of our adult life that you wrote in this book, and you just like pick the candidate that had the clearer message and seemed more likely to be normal.
Yeah.
Like that person won every time.
I mean, look,
like Bush, Obama, right. Bush had a clear message, Kerry didn't. Obama had a clear message.
It always comes down to like change, right?
Obama
so
had
something
a clear
oriented
message,
around change. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
And so that would, I guess, be the first meeting.
Yep.
If you're meeting with people next time, I would be like, let's start here.
Let's start here.
Can we have a
agree,
good basic message? All right, you're a little bit more sanguine than me about the state of affairs right now. I'm building a bunker in Louisiana,
I mean, I don't know.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. What worries you right now? What are the things that worry you the most?
Well, when like Adam Schiff did the closing argument in the impeachment in February of 2020, he talked about how it's like midnight in Washington, right? And it sort of feels like that. Or maybe it's more like Xanax o'clock in Washington, right? Yeah. Because like all of this stuff that's coming out is so hard to keep up with, and the enormity it's just terrifying, So I am.
I guess you mentioned RFK, but what else is out there that you worry about?
Just the like all the chaos, everything that's going on. I mean, Elon Musk getting all our social security numbers. Like, why? What's going on there? The U.S. aid stuff, I think, is horrible. And that's clearly a test run for other stuff they want to do. And so I think I'm fearful about what they're going to do, the unknowns. But yeah.
The Elon thing reminded me of another thing I wanted to talk to you about was some of the kind of an in vogue thing right now on the left is that like actually the answer to our problem is we got to go after these billionaires. Like Trump was up there on stage, he's got the 4 of the 5 richest people in the world behind him, and like that's how we get our mojo back with working people, by going after the billionaires. What do you think about that?
I've talked with I sat down with like 12, 15 members of the House, Senate right after the election to sort of debrief on this. And this actually came up with them is that, so I understand why people do it. There's this view in politics that for an argument to be effective, you need to have tension, you need to find villains, all of that. But I generally find that like if you're just going out and demonizing wealth, demonizing wealthy people just for the sole fact that they're wealthy is like, doesn't really work with people because most people want to be billionaires, they want to be rich. I think where it works more is if you can make a connection to like with Elon Musk, it's not just being rich isn't bad. It's if you're being rich and it gives you this, it allows you to buy an election. It allows you to, control sort of our information atmosphere. It allows you to go and get our social security numbers, If you can make that sort of connection, I think just purely demonizing someone for being rich doesn't work because a lot of people want to be rich.
Yeah. I have something I'm noodling over that could be totally wrong, but whatever. We're doing this live at a library. I wonder if like the phones can start to be the villain because here's like part of my
the phone should be a villain, and we're seeing that.
Yeah, part of my problem with the anti-Elon Zuck Bezos thing is like non-partisans don't really hate them. Like it's a little bit different than going after oil billionaires or going after banks, right? Like people don't like that.
Because you can really connect that to
like
something more
either
substantive.
they're getting something out of it, it's a corruption element to it, or and most people like Amazon, right? Like I like getting my
the numbers
there,
for Amazon are crazy good.
And so I do wonder if but you can go after them by being like, no, what they're taking from you is your kids, your attention, your phone. I don't exactly know how to frame it, but I feel like there's something there.
Yeah, and we're seeing that now. A number, like in New York, for instance, I know the governor's trying to, and I think we'll get through a ban on, phones in schools. And I do think that's, Jonathan Haidt had that book that came out. I really want to read that, although it makes me nervous as a parent. I feel like it's going to cause me anxiety. But I do think going after the phones is going to be a popular thing.
All right, we're running out of time. I want you to rank for me your top 3 favorite candidates you've worked for and your bottom 3 favorite candidates. Go. This is on the record. This is on YouTube.com.
Top 3. Okay. Pete Buttigieg. Adam Schiff. Who would be the third? I don't know.
You only have
Ted
two that
Strickland.
you like?
I'll go with Ted Strickland.
You love Ted Strickland?
He was great. He was brilliant, yeah, and good communicator. Claire McCaskill, can I do it tie
Yeah,
there?
Claire.
Because they were both really good communicators. Bottom three, easily, Bill de Blasio, Andrew Cuomo, and I don't know. Those two were really in a class of themselves.
They're a class
yeah,
of themselves.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, we'll put them there. Okay, I know you're working for a bunch of like house candidates you like. So shout out a couple people that you think are really
to
good.
look at?
Yeah,
look at
up-and-comers.
Marie Glusenkamp-Perez, Pat Ryan, Angie Craig, Jared Golden, the top overperformers in the House, really unique people, and people not household names, but they should be.
Love that. Thank you guys so much. That's Lis Smith.
Thanks.